that's how I found out Ginsu knives can cut through human bone. Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the show. I am, as ever, your host, Alistair, and to my immediate left...
Stage left.
...is Marguerite, who will be executive producing and in the chat and generally keeping you entertained at all the times that you need to be entertained, which is great.
Everyone.
Welcome to the show. We're very aware that you are coming in from all sorts of different places. We've got some folks coming in from the Isle of Man. We have some folks coming in from New York. Hey, Wendy. Hope the stew was good. We have people coming in from America. Hey, Mer. Hope the American stew was good. All over. Escape Artist folks, TMA folks, you are all welcome. And some of you may be new. And with that in mind, a brief explanation of what it is that we're going to be doing. We do the equivalent of the trailers in the adverts at the cinema. You remember the cinema? You remember when you used to go there? Good times. We'll have them again. And in our case, instead of it being that Bacardi advert I watched 175,000 times when I was an impressionable teenager, it's me reading a random monologue. Except...
You could have just stopped with impressionable, I love you.
Hey.
Okay.
Also, I love you too. Heart. Anyway... this week's monologue is from last week's special guest's new book, Notes from Small Planets by Nate Crowley. So, get comfy, grab a drink, make sure you're hydrated, get some food, make sure your pets are squared away, and you have somewhere comfortable to sit, take any meds you need, while I walk you briefly. Nice to see you, however briefly, Topaz.
Have a good one, Topaz. Bye.
Through space, region by region. The star systems of space hold far too many planets, moons, and structures to detail individually. Even the interstellar empires are too numerous to outline here, with more than 30 civilizations having 10 or more systems to their name. Nevertheless, there are some broad regions worth identifying for the prospective astronaut. 1. Outpost Bravo. Our main access point to space is via the gargantuan leaky station at its centre, known as Outpost Bravo, which has become a hub for travel throughout the entire region. Bravo is the home and workplace of the hapless spacemen. There is a footnote here from Eliza, the editor. I really can't cope with the capital letters every time I read this, so this is henceforth the style when referring to them and them alone, okay? But given its location, it's also a proper neutral ground for trade and negotiations. And virtually every species and government in space has an expat community here. The spacemen are a bit stressed out by this happening on their turf while they're trying to do their missions. Who can fathom the missions of the spacemen? But, by and large, they stay sane so long as the civilian population keep mostly to its assigned districts. 2. The Pulp Nebula. Not far from Outpost Bravo sprawls a huge pink-tinged nebula, one of the regions where space's ultra-thin atmosphere gathers into a pocket of breathable air, with a dozen or so moons concealed in its depths, all orbiting the enormous gas giant Grum. This Pulp Nebula, so called for its resemblance to a giant burst-open fruit, is home to an astonishing ecosystem where thick, warm air has allowed life to flourish in the expanse between the worlds. Asteroids on which drifting seeds have taken root have become floating, forested mountains, while gigantic astrocetaceans and jungled-over derelicts drift together through flamingo-coloured skies. It's a wild place, and the moons within it are hotbeds of savage adventure, populated by barbarians, lizard men, and more. Syndicated Space! Almost half of space is looked after by the Syndicate, a conglomeration of human and alien states, with a vast shared fleet of starships that's either an armada of science ships or a navy, depending on who you talk to. Certainly, the Syndicate is a peaceful society, but largely because they outlawed war a while back and threatened to annihilate anyone who so much as thought about starting a beef within their sprawling territory, it seems fair to me. Each Syndicate ship is run by an incredibly charismatic human captain. My favourite is Captain Carl Bludgeon, by a mile, with a diverse senior management team under them, as well as a few dozen randos with handguns. But the guns can be put on a setting that just makes people sleepy, so it's not a military force, okay? Their missions, despite being much celebrated as voyages of exploration, rarely seem to discover anything new. Indeed, 90% of mission time tends to be spent having weirdly episodic encounters with well-known alien species or solving outbreaks of bickering among the crew. 4. Hard vacuum. This harsh, sparsely inhabited region of space is home to the only people Earth astrophysicists respect. Universally human, the societies of hard vacuum refuse to use commonplace technologies such as teleportation and faster-than-light travel since they insist these just aren't possible. These people even get irritated with the forgiving nature of the space around them and have embarked on massive engineering projects to make it colder and emptier and to make planets in their territory more barren. It's called terraforming, spelt the other way. Still, even though their lives are lonely, dry, grim, and difficult, the hard vacuumers take a great deal of pride in being more legitimate than the colourful patchwork of cultures elsewhere in space, whom they dismiss as mere fantasists. The galaxy. Okay, it's not technically a galaxy at all. This clump of 284 star systems is the biggest single civilization grouping in space, and so I suppose we have to respect what its inhabitants, the ever-brash stellar warriors, call it. As far as I can tell, by the way, that designation is largely about bragging rights. This way people can boast about being the best pilot in the galaxy, or making the finest soup in the galaxy, or whatever, and it's much harder for people to disagree. Comprising weirdly uniform planets, each with a single terrain type, the galaxy is ruled over by a staggeringly incompetent, vindictive dictatorship, forever snatching defeat from the jaws of victory against a small band of armed insurrectionists. Looks to camera. For their own part, these insurrectionists could have dismantled the monstrous superstate decades ago, but they still can't stop scrapping among themselves over the issue of whether girls are allowed to fight. Honestly, the whole situation's maddening, and that's not even getting into the sword monks or their completely mental religion. Despite the syndicate's repeated demands to just stop fighting, the warriors don't know any other life, and besides, as they've said many times, the syndicate is more than welcome to come and stop them if they reckon they're hard enough. Who would win out of the syndicate and the galaxy is always a cracking debate, and for the record, if all the best syndicate captains teamed up, they could totally defeat the whole galaxy in an afternoon. It's just beneath the syndicate is all. They're classier than that. Honest. And that, as ever, is the magic of Nate Crowley. How is everybody? I hope you're all doing okay in this profoundly strange week, in this collection of profoundly strange weeks, in this profoundly strange year. Dramatically sips tea. That's an emote right there.
It is. It's going to be that or content warning accents. I haven't decided which yet.
Just a whiteboard with this week's gender, :
Oh yeah, that would make a good t-shirt.
See? Merch. Generating. Always generating.
We are a little punchy this week.
They're fine. Chungus says hi.
Look at how tall Chungus is.
Working out.
They're hiding
Buff.
under their hat.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so how's the week gone? I finished a book about 3 hours ago. And yeah, brain am goo. I did the revisions for the Doctor Who book about Day of the Doctor. Actually, that's a clever lie. I did the revisions a week ago. Today, I finished doing the additional sections because my editor, as one of his larger notes, as I may have mentioned last week, basically came back with, do you think it should have an ending? And we considered this, and the general conclusion was yes. Yes, it probably should, and that endings, by and large, are actually a good thing. So, today I did, I finished off the appendix, which is about the Timeless Children and how all the really fun and interesting and chewy concepts that the Timeless Children potentially has when plugged into Day of the Doctor, and how I can't really discuss those at the moment because I've only been hired to write about Day of the Doctor. But if you happen to... and also the chapter about the Daleks, and about how there are 3 phases of Dalek evolution, just like there are 3 phases of Doctor Who as a show, and how Day of the Doctor speaks to all of them, and how the Daleks evolve from this tremendously efficient and really, really disturbing kind of uniform space Nazi force into just a kind of a shower of assholes, frankly. There's the Swearjar. The Daleks are rubbish, and the Time War and how it ends is actually the reason why they're rubbish. An earlier version of this appendix actually used pro wrestling booking techniques to discuss why the end of the Time War works like it does, and my editor went, "Don't do that." So that one did not survive contact with the enemy. Eldritch, I think it was you who mentioned how freaking awesome Colin Baker is. Now might be a very good time to point out, I wrote the source book for the RPG on the Sixth Doctor, which, due to an accident of scheduling, I wrote alone. So I went into that going, this... Indeed. I went into that going, I'm not sure how I feel about this, and came out of it going, he is one of the best doctors, and I will fight anyone who says different. So I am right there with you. So yeah, that's kind of been the day and the week, and tomorrow I have to do the bit of the full lid, which I haven't done today, and also do a final walkthrough of the already edited chapters.
It's been a full-on week.
And also this week's Pseudopod. And then we're streaming again on Friday, and
then we have a social event on Saturday night at midnight.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long week. By the time we get to Sunday, I think I'm just going to curl into a ball. Oh, and then we're streaming on Sunday. Oh, crud. I keep forgetting.
Why are we streaming on Sunday?
Because it's Sunday.
Yes, of course, 10 till 12. And we have yet to decide.
If it's going to be Windbound.
Windbound or Geese Crimes.
So, we haven't decided yet.
Geese Crimes.
Yeah.
Mess with the honks, you get the bonks.
Exactly. We would very much like that. We haven't decided yet, though. But yeah, it's a full-on week. And then next week is going to be a bit full-on as well. So.
And then the week after that, I complete my 44th journey around the sun.
I don't know. I don't count anymore.
I'm an age.
You will have an age.
Oh, I doubt I could skip the Sunday stream if I wanted. Honestly, it's too much fun, frankly.
We're getting sleep, folks. Don't worry.
We are.
It's just our hours are very dense this week.
You can always tell a week where I have a lot on, because if it's a low impact week, pardon me.
The fact that we're both yawning is a good indicator.
If it's a low impact week, I'll put my headphones in and stream a movie or something while we're both working in here. And the last time I did that was 10 days ago. And it was Blade 2. I deserve better. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Why don't you give us a little recap?
So previously, on A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking,
dun, dun.
We had, thank you, Law and Order.
Have to.
Thank you, Law and Order Bing Bong. Previously, on A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, we entered the training montage, hiding out in a bell tower, away from the guards.
Without a bell.
Without a bell, it should be pointed out. Mona got Spindle to nick her some bread and experimented. Some of her experiments went very well. The exploding dough pigeon could not, under any circumstances, be considered going well. But by the end of the section we read last time, she had put together a bread circus, literally, which Spindle was simultaneously impressed, kind of grossed out by, and wanted to eat. That last bit might just be me.
Don't eat the exploding pigeon.
No. So, they are in hiding. They're not quite on the run, but more and more word is coming in of magic users in the area just fleeing or just straight up disappearing. And Mona is starting to flex her abilities a little bit. And that's where we left it last week. This week, I'm going to have a dramatic sip of tea, give you a chance to get comfortable, and we will kick things off.
And you need to do content warnings.
We have content warnings. Oh, also massive thanks to Darling Sammy for the just incredible opening cover art. I loved that.
Yeah, they did a whole series of a bunch of the different characters, so check the Twitter thread for them.
The content warnings we have this week are Murder Mystery. That's it. There's... and bread.
Accents.
Very well. Content warning accents as well. All right then.
And gluten.
Literal content warning is gluten, just all the way down. Right.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is, I think this is now working. It says I can't share in my own channel. Oh wait, I'm on the wrong thing. Okay, we have the hydrate thingy now.
What?
Yes. So people can force you to take dramatic tea sips now. It looks like.
Hydrate, don't hydrate.
Yes, that's literally what it says. It says hydrate, don't hydrate.
Nice. Right. With all that in mind, let's begin. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. Chapter 16. I found it on a lamppost, said Spindle. He stuck his hands in his pockets and stared down at the bread circus. It was a cheap, flimsy sheet, the sort they print broadsides on. Someone had done a woodcut of me. Not a great one, either, but enough like me to be recognisable. What's it say? Spindle wanted to know. I looked up at him, startled, and he flushed. Not like I can read. I mean, I know that word is wanted, but the rest is gibberish. Wanted for questioning, I said numbly, for murder and suspicion of treason. Treason? Treason? I'm a baker! Well, the one doesn't let out the other, Spindle said reasonably. I balled the poster up in my fist. I wanted to cry. Oh, gods, what if Aunt Tabitha had seen it? How many of these are there? I asked. A bunch, said Spindle, scuffing the floor with one foot. You must have really made somebody mad. I sat down. My stomach hurt in a way that had nothing to do with all the onions I'd been eating. If there were a bunch of wanted posters, everybody must have seen them. All the people who came to the bakery would think I was a traitor and a murderer, and some of them wouldn't believe it, but some of them would. Miss McGrammer probably would. Heck, she'd probably be thrilled to know she was right. And she said something about broadsheets the last time she came in. You people, she'd said. I should have put bugs in your scones, I muttered, staring down at the poster. She must have seen them. Aunt Tabitha must have seen the posters. They probably would have put them up all over my neighbourhood, and that meant that Aunt Tabitha might have to look at them every day. I must have said something out loud, because Spindle put out a hand and patted me awkwardly on the shoulder. It's not as bad as that, he said. They got guards on the street, but they ain't done nothing to hurt your kin. How can it not be as bad as that? I cried, wadding the wanted poster up in my hands. I'm a wanted criminal! Yeah, but at least she knows if they've got the posters up, they haven't got you, said Spindle. Means you're alive, too. I ain't going to put up posters if they've killed you. The knot in my stomach loosened a little. Yeah, I said. Yeah, you're right. They wouldn't have put up posters if the Spring Green Man had killed me, or if I was in the dungeons somewhere. If that was the case, they'd want me to just stop existing. I wondered why they wanted to get hold of me so badly. What did Oberon think I knew? What did I know? I racked my brain. I didn't know anything. If anything, I knew a lot less than the other magicers in town. They'd all been smart enough to leave town for a start. No, surely there was nothing I knew, nothing, that Oberon would want hushed up. Fine. If I didn't know anything, what had I done? My knee-jerk response was to yell that I hadn't done anything, but that wasn't right. I'd crossed Oberon by being innocent. Was that enough? Hell, he must have known I was innocent. If he was working with the Spring Green Man, he knew perfectly well that I hadn't killed Tibby. Was he really so petty that one insignificant bakery girl not allowing herself to be framed for murder was enough to hunt her to the ends of the earth? The Spring Green Man had said something about being moved up the list. Maybe Oberon was that petty, or... What if Bob had killed the Spring Green Man? Oberon would come after me for that. There'd been some others too, said Spindle, pulling more broadsheets out of his coat. They had a curve where they'd moulded against his body. Wasn't sure if one of them might be about you, so I brought them all. I smoothed the papers out on the floor and began to read. Well, this one says there's a curfew, I said. Nobody on the streets between midnight and 5 in the morning unless they've got necessary business. I frowned. Even if I hadn't been a criminal, a curfew would have bothered me. I had to walk between my room and the bakery every morning, usually earlier than 5. Would the constables consider making bread necessary business? Well, of course they would. What are they, monsters? Anyway, back to the story. Heard about that, said Spindle. They got criers all over town. People aren't happy about it. I bet. There were lots of jobs that happened between midnight and 5. Lots of them. The night soil men came through, and the lamplighters. Those would probably be considered necessary business, but what about folks who stayed out late? Widow Holloway, one of my favourite regulars, couldn't sleep the night through since her husband died 11 years ago, so she usually went out walking in the middle of the night when she woke up. I met her sometimes on the way to the bakery. Doesn't matter that I can't sleep, Mona, she used to say in her piping little voice. When you're as old as I am, you don't feel like wasting time sleeping anyway. Maybe that was true, but what would she do if the constables told her she couldn't go for a walk? My eye travelled down the broadsheet. At the bottom, in smaller letters, it said, By order of Inquisitor Oberon. You got a funny look, said Spindle. I said hollowly, pushing the broadsheet away. What's this one? Spindle asked, pointing to another sheet. It's a couple of days old, but people acted really weird when that one went up. Weird how? I lifted the sheet and had a woodcut of a soldier's helmet on top. Spindle scratched behind an ear thoughtfully. Well, some of them got really mad, and some of them seemed kind of happy. In a mad kind of way. And Slug said that he'd always known it, and One-Eyed Benji said that Slug was an idiot. Nobody believed that was true. And Slug said if it wasn't true, why was it on a paper then? He grimaced. The stupid thing is, neither of them could read a bloody word, so neither of them knew what they was talking about. Not really. Despite the fascinating saga of Slug and One-Eyed Benji, I turned my attention back to the broadsheet. Be a patriot. Our courageous soldiers have marched out against the enemy, but there's a battle to be fought at home too. Spies are everywhere. Do you know your neighbour? Could they be a spy? Or a wizard traitor? Report suspicious activity to your constables at once. Reward offered for information leading to the arrest of spies, wizard traitors, and those giving comfort to the enemy. Good heavens! What does it say? I read the broadsheet to Spindle, who listened with his mouth open. That'll set the cat among the pigeons, he said when I was done reading. Everybody will be claiming their neighbours giving comfort to the enemy. Who do you figure the enemy is? Whoever this army went out to fight, I said. Karak's mercenaries, I should think. Them weird people from up north who are always trying to take over a city. Spindle whistled. How are you going to comfort them? I think so. I didn't know for sure. It wasn't like I'd had a chance to keep up with gossip up here in the bell tower. What is it they want? Their own city, as far as I know. I scratched the back of my neck. They live out around the edges, but they'll go for a city if they think it's weak. Sort of like wolves watching sheep, you know? I've never seen a wolf, said Spindle pragmatically. And our city's a lot better than any smelly old sheep. Metaphor was not Spindle's strong suit. What would they need spies for anyway? They just come up and attack a city, don't they? You don't need spies for that. I propped my chin on one hand and watched the bread-crust elephant go through its paces. Walked in a circle, waved its trunk, sat up on its hind legs, walked in a circle again. The bread crust still didn't show much initiative. I knew I was only 14. I knew I didn't know that much about politics, but Spindle's question seemed like a really good one. Carrick spies? In the city? Why? Carracks are really pretty straightforward. They raid your farm so you don't have anything to eat, and then they try to take over your town. If they succeed, everybody dies, and the Carracks hang out there for a while and eat all the food and take all the money. Then they go to another town. They've managed to do this to a couple of smaller towns over the years, but never to a real city with an army. They do keep trying though. It is horrible. It's not complicated. It doesn't seem like it would require spies. Plus, Carracks hated magic. It didn't make any sense that they'd hire magicians to spy for them. The whole idea of wizard traitors helping the Carracks was ridiculous, but here it was, on a broadsheet, with the Inquisitor's name on it. I wonder if Lord Ethan knows about this. In the last war, where the Golden General got his reputation, I couldn't remember papers like this. Of course, I'd been much younger, but surely I'd remember a thing like that. And damn it, Riverbraid was always good to magickas. It didn't make sense. Ah, I get it. So that's why Slug was happy, said Spindle thoughtfully. Always did hate magickas. Never wanted Tibby in on a job, or Willy the Thumbs either. He's all mean and happy now that the magickas are gone. Gone? I asked absently. Ain't seen eye nor hair of one for days, said Spindle, except you, knacker him all. And Slug said he actually saw Big Mitch get dragged away by the guards, and there was a notice nailed to the door. He frowned. Of course, Big Mitch ain't much of a magicka. He is a big drinker, so they could have been hauling him away for being drunk and disorderly. Again, I sighed. The papers were making me angry, and under the anger was a whole lot of scared. The gingerbread man came down from the slotted window where he kept watch and stood on the edge of a paper. I wondered if he could read. Probably not. Reading's complicated. Then again, so's walking and circuses and stuff, so maybe I could enchant one to read if I tried. There's one more, said Spindle. This one's new today. This broadsheet was very clearly new. The paper was still crisp and hadn't blurred at the edges of the letters. Pulled it down not 5 minutes after it went up, said Spindle proudly. I was on my way here anyway. Wizard traitors are everywhere. It is vital for our security as a nation that we prevent infiltration by hostile magical elements. All loyal citizens with wizardly talents must register with the Loyalty Board within 10 days for their own safety. The author, I thought gloomily, had clearly never met a capital letter he didn't like. I was surprised he hadn't printed Wizard Traitor in red ink. Maybe it would have cost too much. I looked to the bottom of the page, and sure enough, in smaller block letters, it said, by order of Inquisitor Oberon. Well, this'll make people really mad, I said when I had finished reading it to Spindle. Spindle said, I looked up. What? He rubbed the back of his neck and refused to meet my eyes. I waited. It might not, he said, all in a rush. A lot of people are a little bit iffy about magical talents. You had the little piddly ones, my sister. A lot of people didn't like her for it. Some of the kids, I knocked them down. He crouched down on the flagstones, looking curiously at the paper. Couldn't knock them all down, though, and Slug's bigger than me a lot, and so he knocked me down. It made no sense. No magicka with an ounce of brain would work for the Carracks. I don't know what they do to grown-ups with magic, but presumably they don't just leave you on a hillside to die. Did people who weren't magickas know that, though? Was it the sort of thing you paid attention to if you didn't have to worry about it yourself? What if Spindle was right? What if people are believing the broadsheets? I didn't know what to say. Some of the people at the bakers, they liked my talent, didn't they? Making gingerbread dance. Most of them. Some people might think it was a good idea, said Spindle apologetically. Not to do anything bad to a magicka or anything, but just To know where they are. I think a registry was a good thing. They wouldn't if they were one. Hardly anybody is, though. Or if they are, nobody notices. I don't know any more than you and Molly right now. Spindle thought about it. Told you about Big Mitch and Spitter, but I ain't seen her in a long time either. This was depressing. My hopes that the city would rise up in defence of their magical citizens were dashed before they'd even gotten started. I hugged my knees. I'd been moved up on the list. Where on the list had Tibby been? Or Big Mitch? Why would Oberon want a list of the magical talented anyway? That's easy, because then he'd know where they were. And if he knew where they were, he could do something about it. What else had the Spring Green Man said? You'll all be eliminated. Eventually. I mimicked him, slowly remembering that awful night, crouching in the cellar behind Bob. That was what he said. Something about a list. Spindle cocked his head. The gingerbread man rubbed his hands together. Oberon wants to know where we all are, I said. He's using the Spring Green Man to sniff us out, but that's not enough. Either he doesn't trust the Spring Green Man, or more people than me might have escaped. He wants the complete list so that he can destroy us all, and he's going to have people registering with this loyalty board, and they're going to do the work for him. Significant tea break. I love how the gingerbread man's posture is used as like almost a dramatic chorus. I love the gingerbread man rubbing his hands. It's like, oh, it's getting real, folks. Oh, hi, Tony. Hope you're doing well.
And yes, Magpie?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
That's all her.
Was that the end of the chapter?
Yes.
Okay, hold on.
Bread or alive. And beyond it.
Hello, I'm Bandit. Okay.
Chapter 17. The night I spent in the bell tower after Spindle brought the broadsheets was one of the most restless I've ever had. Not the worst. It would be hard to top having the Spring Green Man trying to kill me in the cellar. But it was the most restless. I tossed. I turned. I tried to get comfortable, and that is not easy on a pile of straw. If you have any notions that straw makes a good bed, just abandon them now, okay? Straw is itchy. Straw pokes you. It is softer to sleep on than dirt or flagstones, sure. But the individual straws, not soft at all. They stab you through your clothes, and when you wriggle to move one out of the way, 5 more get in position to poke you. Still, the straw was the least of my worries. Sure, I was tired. You wouldn't think you could get tired cooped up in a bell tower all day. But you can, particularly when you do 11 push-ups and run laps around the room for half an hour. They were good push-ups too. On my toes, not on my knees. My forearms were really strong from smacking all that dough around, as I've said. But my biceps, no slouches either. The posters were still there. I shoved them to the far side of the room because, honestly, they seemed to breathe malice into the air. I turned them over so they were face down, otherwise I felt like the words were staring at me. I know that sounds stupid. I know that's how I felt. The gingerbread man was standing sentry in the window again, and I watched his small, brave shadow travel across the floor as the night progressed, but I couldn't sleep. My thoughts ran over and under each other, stretching and churning, as if my brain were trying to pull taffy. I swear to myself that there was nothing I could do, that I was going to stop thinking and go to sleep now, and then 10 minutes later my brain would be going again, jitter-flop, like a 3-legged frog on a griddle. Oberon was planning to get rid of every magically talented person in the city. He'd already gotten a bunch of us, and a bunch more had just left. Spindle's friends, his sister. I didn't really believe that little Sydney had run away to sea anymore. Lena at the market had said that everybody should get out, and like an idiot, I hadn't listened. How many were gone? Just gone. Maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe I should be asking, how many of us were left? Great. Jitter flop, went my brain, stuttering around, trying to find solutions to problems that were so much bigger than me it was laughable. What could I do? Well, not getting killed by the Spring Green Man was probably a very good start. Great. Then what? Stay up in the bell tower for the rest of my life, living on Spindle's charity and the Dower brothers below until the Spring Green Man came sniffing up the ladder after me? No, not an option. Leave the city? I rolled over in the straw, which fired a new volley of stickers into my arms and legs. I could leave, I guess. Maybe that was the sensible, sane thing to do. I could go to another city, get apprenticed to a baker somewhere. I wasn't bragging to say most would probably want me. Oh, but that would be hard. I try not to think about my parents too much. They had died an awfully long time ago. But I still remembered how my mum smelled, and the way my dad chuckled, this furry sort of chuckle down deep in his chest. Losing them had been the worst thing ever. If I had to lose Aunt Tabitha and my uncle and the bakery, I might find another bakery. I might even love another bakery. But it wouldn't be mine in the same way. And that was assuming I got anywhere. The roads between city-states were well-travelled and I wouldn't be eaten by bears, but being a 14-year-old girl on the road alone meant there were worse things than bears out there. And we were sort of cordially at war with a couple of other city-states, and what if I got all the way to one of them and they turned me away because I'd come from River Braid? And the army was supposed to be out dealing with the Carrick's mercenaries, which raided all the city-states with a kind of even-handed brigandry, but suppose the army didn't catch them all and I stumbled into a Carrick's camp. They ate people! Possibly. It would be ignominious to escape the Spring Green Man, only to get eaten by a Carrick's. I'd almost rather get eaten by bears. At least that was sort of normal behaviour for bears. And there was still the problem of being a magicka. If I got to a city, I still might have to leave again, or live in a wizard's quarter, or get registered by the government as a known magicka. That was what I was trying to avoid. It seemed like once you agreed that the government could put you on a list because of something you were born with, you were asking for trouble, because sooner or later, somebody like Oberon would get a hold of that list. Jitter flop. Jitter flop. So I couldn't leave, and I couldn't hide forever. What did that leave? Stopping Oberon and the Spring Green Man, which I certainly couldn't do by myself. Well then, who could? I gave up on any effort at sleep and sat up, pulling my knees against my chest and picking malicious straw out of my pants. I felt so jittery that I wanted to get up and run or go down and do something. The gingerbread man hopped down from the window and poked his head down the hole where the ladder came from. A moment later, he came back up and waved at me. I set a foot on the ladder and went cautiously down. The door at the foot of the tower was closed, but the hinges were very well oiled. I slipped into the church, moonlight seeping through the cracks in the boarded windows. I heard a crier off in the distance. 1 o'clock and all's well. 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 Maybe for him. Restless, my child? Asked a voice. I whirled around with a yelp. It was the old priest. He was sitting in the second row of pews, so small and silent I had taken him for a pile of coats. He looked to be about 1,000 years old, give or take a few hundred. Sorry, I said. I didn't know whether to run back up the ladder or try to get out of the church. He wasn't supposed to know I was there. Had I just given myself away? He smiled and nodded vaguely at me. After a minute, I realized he probably couldn't see me very well. His eyes had a dim, unfocused look. He patted the pew back. Come and sit down, child. If you are restless, prayer is good for the spirit. And if you are tired, there is no harm in sitting either. I crept closer. He looked so frail. I couldn't imagine he could grab me. The gingerbread man lay close against the back of my neck. I sat down on the pew in front of him, a little to one side. "Is something troubling you, my child?" he asked after a while. And before I could say anything, he smiled and added, "It doesn't matter if you tell me, you know. I am stone deaf and cannot hear it anyway. It makes me very popular in the confessional these days." It occurred to me that he probably would have a hard time turning me in, even if he wanted to. "I'm scared," I said finally. "I miss my bakery. I'm scared, and I'm sick of onions and porridge, and I'm only 14, and I shouldn't have to do this." I folded my arms around myself. "I'm scared that the people who help me are going to get hurt." The old priest smiled and patted my shoulder. There, my dear. I'm sure it's not as bad as that. Or perhaps it is, in which case I'm sorry. Or perhaps you were talking about the weather. Well, if nothing else, I find that you can rarely go wrong appealing to a higher power." We sat in the pew, and suddenly all the things percolating in my mind came together. I had poured in all the ingredients and stirred, and the dough had finally begun to rise. A higher power. I needed a higher power. Not a spiritual one, but one right here in the city. "The Duchess!" I said out loud. The gingerbread man moved restlessly against my neck. Somehow I would have to get word to the Duchess. She'd give me a fair hearing, I was sure of it. She'd intervened on my behalf before. I mean, she didn't seem warm, but she also didn't seem cruel, and she had wizards, real wizards, not just piddly little magickas like me, wizards who could do things, powerful things, and stop Oberon in his tracks. Come to think of it, her name hadn't been on any of the posters. They were all issued by order of Inquisitor Oberon, and I had a hard time believing the army wizards would be all that happy about her registry either. Did the Duchess even know about the posters? Nobody ever saw her outside the palace except for during parades. There hadn't been a parade for a long time, and the Golden General was gone. I was broken from my thoughts by a faint noise behind me. When I turned, the old priest was asleep, with his head tilted back against the pew. After a moment, he let out a really impressive snore. The gingerbread man came out and stared at him in awe.
I think you need to hydrate, honey.
I'm looking for the button and I'm not seeing it.
Fine. Oh, no! I set it so that you can only do it once per night. I've hoisted myself. Okay, have a tea anyway. Well done.
I got up and crept back to the tower. My mind was a whirl. Could Inquisitor Oberon be doing all this without the Duchess's knowledge? Why would he keep her in the dark? Could he be plotting against her, as well as the Magickas? Why did he even want the Magickas dead? He couldn't just hate all magic, like some people, could he? Otherwise, would he really use the Spring Green Man, a Magicka himself, to hunt them down? Could this be part of some larger plot? Even if the Duchess did know about the posters, even if she somehow believed all this stuff about wizard traitors, someone had to tell her that Inquisitor Oberon was using the Spring Green Man to kill Magickas. So that was easy. I just had to get a chance to talk to the Duchess with the understanding that all of her guards and ministers and functionaries would arrest me on sight and hand me over to my worst enemies. Piece of cake. You want to break in where? Said Spundle. Spindle's brother. He's introduced later. He's cool. Said Spindle, staring at me like I had suddenly grown antlers. The Duchess's palace. No. The Duchess's bedroom. The palace is too big. It has to be someplace where she won't have a lot of people around her. The Duchess's bedroom, said Spindle, staring at me like I had suddenly grown purple antlers garlanded with daisies and marmalade kittens. It's the only way. You're out of your mind. You're mad as a mudlark. You're completely bonkers. Spindle looked wildly around the tower room until his eyes fell on the gingerbread man. You! Tell her! The gingerbread man shrugged. He was displaying a lot of independent thought these days, but he still couldn't talk, which was good. There would have been something really unsettling about a talking gingerbread man. I want him to be played by Vin Diesel so badly.
I am Groot.
Right? You'll get killed. How is that different from anything else? I'm stuck in this stupid tower until either they catch me or you get caught for something and stop bringing me my food and I die of a porridge overdose. At least if I try to warn the Duchess, I'm doing something. The nice thing about Spindle is that he didn't tell me to be patient. A grown-up would have told me to be patient. It would all work out. Spindle didn't bother, which was good because I was done being patient. Instead, he stomped over to the slit of a window and glared over the rooftops. I let him alone and settled for braiding a couple of stalks of straw together. Finally, Spindle said, "Getting into the palace shouldn't be too hard. They've got a lot of people going in and out, and that always makes it easy. But once we're in trouble. You got filched uniforms and stuff, where everybody stops you to ask who you are and why you're there. There's no uniform in the world that'll get you into the Duchess's bedroom with her. Don't you think like a maid? Or maybe?" Spindle gave me a withering look. "You don't know much about servants, do you?" "Oh, and you do?" "Sure. Yeah, pickpockets. You got to know your mark. If you're going to break into a big house, you actually want the eye-up servants' rooms. They got jewellery and stuff, things that are worth money, but not so much that you can't sell it." "You can't sell something that's worth too much money." This sounded bizarre to me. I mean, breaking into somebody's house to steal their stuff sounded kind of bizarre already. I was pretty sure my nerves would give out before I was even in a window. Meanwhile, Spindle was still looking at me like I was an idiot. Mind you, he did this so often that I was starting to wonder if he just had an eyelid tick or something. Surely I couldn't be that dense. "Steal a great lady's jewels and ain't nobody gonna fence it. You know, sell the stolen stuff for you," he said. "It's more trouble to you than it's worth because nobody can move it. It's too good, you know. No back alley pawn shop would have stuff like that, so it has to be stolen and the constables will get awfully interested and nobody's going to buy it because they don't have the money anyway. Stealing jewels like that is high-level stuff." I propped my chin on my hand. "So what? You're telling me I'm not noble-looking enough to be a maid to the Duchess?" "No," said Spindle. "So what would you do?" I asked testily. Tact in Spindle's world was apparently something that happened to other people. "I've got to think about it," said Spindle. "I've got to go look at the palace. This is crazy. I told you this is crazy, right?" Which is how we, 5 nights later, wound up climbing out of the Duchess's toilet. Water break. Chapter 18. So in a palace, the toilet's called the garderobe. It's basically a closet with a hole in the floor that drops straight down a couple of stories into a cesspit. In the nicer ones, and the Duchess's garderobe was really nice, you got a little carved wooden bench with a seat on it, and you can just sit there. Think about life or whatever you want to think about when nature is calling. And the point is that since it's 3 stories down and there are vents, it doesn't even smell bad. Much. Comparatively speaking. Regular people have to use chamber pots, but if you're rich or noble and you've got a castle with a spare closet and a straight shot to the ground, you get a garderobe. There's a guy whose job it is to shovel the cesspit out once a week. It's under a locked grate in a little stone hut with locked doors. Who knew you had to keep that under lock and key? I mean, nobody's going to steal it. Right? As far as I could tell, Spindle broke into the palace disguised as an ash sweeper, then followed this guy around for 2 days until he got a chance to filch the keys. And then he made a wax imprint in a bit of old candle and returned the key before the cesspit cleaner even noticed. I was really impressed by this, and I told him so. Spindle muttered something about how it was no different than any other second-story job, and there was no place in the world for a clever noddy who couldn't swindle some outhouse cove. I think that was what they call thieves' cant. It occurred to me that Spindle's criminal experience was a bit wider than I had realised. I'm pretty sure second-story job meant he used to be a burglar. And presumably he was also the clever noddy in question, which would make the cesspit shovel at the outhouse cove. I wondered what Spindle and his sister Tibby had gotten up to before the Spring Green Man had showed up and put an end to her career. Some hints that Spindle dropped now and again made me think he'd been a part of a gang of child thieves, but apparently they'd either broken up or he'd left when Tibby had died. It was weird to think that this sort of thing went on in the city while I'd been at home innocently baking muffins, wondering if we had enough sugar to get through the week. At any rate, if you wanted to steal the keys to a royal cesspit, you couldn't ask for better than Spindle. Once we had the key, though, it was, well, still not easy. I have never climbed a 3-story anything in my life. It's not like it comes up when you're a baker. You never have to climb a ladder and swan dive into a vat of croissant dough or anything. I'm not afraid of heights, as far as I know, but I wasn't sure that even with a rope, I was going to be able to do it. And I was awfully worried about what the Duchess was going to think when we showed up smelling like the inside of a garderobe. If she just started screaming, we were going to wind up in the dungeon without a chance to say our piece. I spent most of the day repeating my speech over and over in my head. Your Grace, I've come to warn you of a plot against magicers and perhaps against you. Your Grace, Inquisitor Oberon, is plotting against them, and I'm sorry, this is the only way I could get close enough to warn you. Your Grace, have you ever heard of the Spring Green Man? Oh, this was madness. I was going to show up dripping sewage on the Duchess's rug. She was going to have me thrown in the dungeon, and no one was going to listen to me, and magic folk were still going to die. The bit about Inquisitor Oberon plotting against her might not even be true. I didn't have any proof anyway. I just felt really nervous with Oberon still in the city and the Golden General and the army somewhere else. It just seemed like a really bad idea. Was I really about to climb up a 3-story toilet because the army being out of the city seemed like a bad idea? Apparently so. Well, even if they threw me in the dungeon, at least I'd be out of the bell tower. The room seemed to get smaller and smaller once we had a plan. I paced back and forth for hours, 25 steps, all the way around, and I kept expecting it to take less. 24, 23. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. I had to get up once in the middle of the night and measure it, and it was still 25 steps. Probably that sounds nuts, but nobody was watching except for the gingerbread man and the ragtag breadcrumb circus. Spindle came for me on the 4th night, and I went down the ladder without a backward glance, the gingerbread man clinging to my hair. I was glad to be gone. The lay brother had been giving me odd looks. It might have been nothing. It might have been that he'd seen the wanted posters and there was no use taking a chance. I left the bread circus behind. They'd almost run out of magic and were just crude little sculptures made of bread now. I don't know what the priests thought of that. We didn't go out by the main door, but through the back where the priests lived. I paused in the kitchen to tap each of the hard black loaves waiting on the counter. You're good bread, I told them. You're soft and you want to stay soft, and if I live through this, I'm going to make sure the priests get some of Bob's best sourdough from now on, assuming Bob is still... Oh, damn. You all right? Spindle said suspiciously. I rubbed my nose, sniffed. Yeah, I'm fine. Being out on the street again felt like my birthday. I was giddy. I wanted to laugh and dance and hug strangers. I swung around a lamppost just because I could. Spindle had to thump my shoulder and hiss, "Settle down, people are looking," before I stopped giggling. It was a beautiful night. It had rained in the evening, but that was done, and now the mist was rising from the water and the cobbles were slick and shining with reflected light. I could hear frogs croaking in the canals. I was still feeling giddy and light-headed when we passed a constable. That settled me down in a hurry. He was slouched against the canal railing with his hands stuffed in his pockets, and I doubt I would even have noticed him except for being, a wanted fugitive. "Relax," muttered Spindle. "Don't tense up. They don't notice you. If you just walk along and pretend like you're going somewhere. Curfew isn't for another couple hours yet. We went in a roundabout path, in case anybody was following us from the church. It didn't seem likely, but Spindle was paranoid, and honestly, that suited me just fine. There were more broadsheets pinned up, talking about the curfew and registering magical talents. There was one that said, "Do you know an unregistered wizard? Wizard traitors could be anyone. They could be your family, your friends, even your children. Loyal citizens will register today." Well, that was depressing. "You alright?" asked Spindle. "You've gone all fishy-coloured." "Nothing," I muttered. It's fine. It wasn't that different from the others, but the notion of telling people to hand in their own kids for being magickas, that turned my stomach. I didn't offer to read the broadsheet for Spindle. When we passed by Peony Street, I looked down at Master Elwitch's shop. There was a for sale sign in the window. Someone had nailed a broadsheet to the door. We didn't see any that had my face on it. Maybe those were only near the bakery, or maybe they'd forgotten about me. I could only hope it was the second possibility. The notion of Aunt Tabitha having to go out and buy ingredients, surrounded by all those printed faces. Of course, sometime tomorrow I'd probably be in jail, or exonerated, so they could take the broadsheets down one way or another. The criers would have other news to shout. Hopefully it would be "Plot against Magickas uncovered," and not "Poop-covered assassin foiled in Duchess's bathroom." Really, of all the ways to go. Chapter 19. All we had to do was get into the palace, make our way past the guards to the curtain wall, which was a kind of wall sandwich between the palace and the outer walls, where they store all the stuff you don't want to keep right inside the palace, like stables and cesspits. Then we'd wait until nightfall, sneak into the cesspit hut, climb up the inside of the garderobe wall, which was 3 stories high and covered in nastiness, and also, according to Spindle, it had metal spikes. "Spikes?" I said faintly. "Oh, they're nothing," Spindle said, waving a hand. "You can squish right by 'em. They're kind of handy, honestly, because we'll tie a rope to 'em so you can climb easier." I did not feel convinced. "I reckon they keep a grown-up out," he allowed. "That's what they're there for, see? To keep somebody from climbing up and stabbing the Duchess while she's having a—" "Right, thank you, Spindle. I get the point." The plan was for me to work in the kitchens until nightfall. The guards would notice a scullery maid trying to get into the palace late at night, but they probably wouldn't notice if one of the maids who had come in during the day didn't leave. I was afraid they'd notice a stranger in the kitchen, but Spindle snorted. "That place? They wouldn't notice if you came in riding an elephant. Just act like you're supposed to be there." And you know what? It turned out he was right. Getting into the palace was the easy part. Spindle had nicked an apron. I put it on and walked past the guards in the courtyard, clammy with sweat, my knees shaking, but their eyes slid right over me. I peeked into the kitchen. It was a crazy whirl of activity. The head cook was a red-faced woman who barked orders like a drill sergeant. People ran past carrying trays of food and buckets of water and great piles of dirty dishes. I was afraid to get in anyone's way. What if they noticed me? What if they knew I wasn't supposed to be there? Then I saw a girl trying to cut out biscuits on a table, and honestly, making a hash of it. She kneaded the biscuits far too long. They were going to be like rocks. I hurried over and nudged her aside. "You're overworking the dough," I said. "You want it to hold together, but that's all. If you knead it too long, they turn into bricks." "Will you do it?" she asked, giving me a grateful look. "I've still got to cut up the ham and cheese for these, and there's the eggs." "Of course," I said. I'm new. My name's Mona." "Is there anything I should be doing?" "Just make the biscuits," she said. "I'm Jenny. I'll be back in a minute." A minute, in this case, was nearly 45. But Jenny did come back. By then I'd finished 3 batches of biscuits. Whenever the cook looked in my direction, my knees quaked, but she didn't stop me. I used a little magic to save the first set of biscuits. "You're fluffy," I told them. "You're very fluffy and soft. You're like little fluffy lambs, only without the poop stuck to your tail, because that's gross." They agreed to be fluffy. Biscuits are really accommodating that way. Now, probably this was a waste of time, since I had much bigger worries than fluffy biscuits. But hey, once a baker, always a baker. If I was going to get thrown in the dungeon, at least I was going to leave a trail of quality pastries behind me. "You did it," said Jenny. She was about my age, with thin little bird bone wrists. "Cor, I hate doing those. My arms get so tired. How are you at kneading bread?" "What I don't know about kneading bread," I said with great honesty, "is not worth knowing." It was 5 hours before I managed to slip out of the kitchen. It had gone from bread to chopping vegetables, and then Jenny left for the evening, and since I kept explaining that I was new, the other girls stuck me in the scullery, and that meant I had to wash dishes. A lot of dishes. And magic couldn't help me with that. There were 4 other girls working in there, and they gave me the worst ones. I didn't really mind. It's never fun to wash dishes, but it is kind of satisfying to get a really bad one clean. Some of them needed to soak with lye. There was no getting around it. I finally excused myself to go to the bathroom and ran into Spindle on the way to the privies. "Where have you been?" he hissed. He was wearing the ash sweeper rags and nearly vanished in the shadows around the low wooden buildings. "I've been waiting for hours." "I was doing dishes," I said. "I can't believe this. Nobody's asked where I'm from or anything. Anybody could just walk right in here." "That's 'cause most assassins don't waste time doing dishes," said Spindle. "They're looking for scary people, not girls in aprons." He pulled me into the shadow of the wall. "Come on, let's get moving. We wait much longer, it'll be morning again." We passed 2 guards on the way to the guardrobe, and neither of them so much as glanced at us. An ash boy and a scullery girl, not worthy of their notice. Spindle glanced around, made sure no one was watching, unlocked the garderobe door, and waved me inside. It stank. It stank a lot. I mean, the canals get pretty ripe in summer, don't get me wrong, but at least there was a lot of air for them to diffuse in. This was a little stone chimney with a couple of narrow slits in the wall, and the smell had etched its way into the mortar. There was a rope hanging down. "Left it earlier," Spindle said, "while I was waiting for you to get out. The first set of spikes is easy to get to, so I tied a rope to it." He gave me a patronising look. "Well, easy for me." "Thanks, Spindle. You're just like a brother to me, in the most annoying possible sense." He grinned and gave me a quick punch on the shoulder, which, for Spindle, was just an incredible display of affection. I actually got a little choked up, but that might just have been the smell. So, shoulders against the wall, feet against the opposite wall, grab the rope in both hands, walk feet up a couple of steps, brace, hitch shoulders up, haul on the rope, brace, hitch, haul, brace, hitch, haul. The stones were cold, but honestly that was almost a relief, because I hadn't gotten more than 2 man-heights off the ground before I was dripping with sweat. It ran into my eyes and off the tip of my nose and down my back, and it etched and tickled so that I thought bugs were crawling on me. Oh Lord, bugs. I hadn't even thought about bugs. What kind of awful bugs did you get in a garderobe? I also hadn't anticipated there would be moss on top of the gunk on the walls. Moss is not good for climbing. It looks furry, but if you try to stand on it, it turns slick as ice in a hurry. When I passed one of the vent holes, the light coming in showed green streaks of moss along my hands, in addition to blackish streaks of something else that will not be named. Oh, this is delightful. I was going to get to the top and I would be covered in stuff. You know what? Let's go with stuff. I would pop out of a toilet covered in stuff and dripping sweat and maybe with bugs on me and expect the Duchess to listen to anything I had to say. Soon I ran into the first row of spikes. I mean, literally, I ran into them. My head whacked into one, and thank goodness they weren't very sharp. Honestly, they were more like metal fence posts than spikes, arranged in an X across the garderobe. Spindle had been right. It seemed they were designed to keep out grown-ups, so there was more than enough space to get by them. Spindle could get through without even touching the sides, and I managed well enough, although I had to sort of shuffle around the chimney until I was under a gap, and there was a bad minute where I hit a slick patch of moss and thought I was going to fall. The gingerbread man stood on a spike, grabbed my sleeve, and pulled. It didn't help at all. but I did appreciate the thought. Spindle was waiting just above my head. He dropped down. The metal crosspiece made a muffled bong that terrified me, and untied the rope, then scurried up the side of the guardrobe to the next set of spikes. A moment later, the rope dropped back down onto my head. I went back to climbing. Brace, hitch, haul. I slowly passed 2 more sets of spikes and another row of vents. The vents were narrow, like arrow slits, but set horizontally. I stopped for a minute on the set of spikes just under it and put my face against it to breathe. My legs were killing me. My shoulders were starting to throb. The problem was I was stuck. Going back down was going to be just as bad as going on up, unless I fell, in which case I was going to hit a crosspiece and go splat. Here, his Spindle above me, at the top. I looked up. Light. Actual light. I could see the light at the top of the through the toilets. Anyway, it was light. Spindle was silhouetted against it, like a spider. As I watched, the silhouette got an arm across the top and then hauled himself out. I was nearly there. I went back to bracing and hitching with a will. Fortunately, the last set of spikes was close enough to the top that I could put my feet on the crosspiece and try to get my shoulders through the hole. And then I promptly got stuck. The spikes had stuff on them. Stuff that made for bad footing. So I couldn't push very well with my feet, and my shoulders were through, but that was about as far as I got. Spindle grabbed my arm and hauled. The gingerbread man jumped down and pulled. The carved seat scraped at my waist. "You have been eating too many of your own pastries," Spindle grumbled. Now that was blatantly unfair, since I'd been at the church long enough to have dropped any excess pastry weight I might have been carrying around. "It's easy for you," I hissed. "You don't have hips. Now shut up and pull." He pulled. I started to emerge. Unfortunately, my skirt was rugged up under the seat, and while I was coming up, it was not coming up with me. The gingerbread man covered his face with his hands. Great! I was going to be covered in poop, sweating like a pig, in my underwear, trying to make my case to the Duchess. And in that very moment, she opened the door to the guardrobe and walked in. She had a book in her hand and obviously planned to spend some quality time in the garderobe by herself. If the Duchess had been a screamer, the guards would have burst in, and things might have turned out very differently. But she didn't scream. Instead, she put her hand to her mouth and went, "Oh. Your Grace, please listen to me," I said, sticking half in and half out of the toilet. "I've come to warn you of a plot against you." Admittedly, I still wasn't sure that the plot was against her, and not against all magickas, but I thought I had a better chance of getting her attention this way. Although, in fairness, I suppose, if a half-naked girl is being hauled out of your toilet by a boy covered in sewage, that garners plenty of attention too. "Your Grace, please," I was thoroughly stuck. Like a cork out of a bottle, and now my feet were just barely touching the crosspiece on the spikes, so I couldn't push at all. The skirt had slid down another few inches. Fortunately, my underwear was still holding up. Faithful underwear. "My name's Mona. You saved me from Inquisitor Oberon a few weeks ago. I was in court and you stood up for me, so I came to tell you have to listen. Please." "How did you get up here?" she asked. It was not exactly the response I was looking for, but at least she wasn't yelling for the guards. I probably didn't look like much of a threat, in fairness, jammed into the toilet, and Spindle was awfully young and scrawny for an assassin. "We climbed up," said Spindle. "Weren't hard, well, except for this bit." He gazed at me in professional disgust. I took a deep breath. That was probably a mistake. I could smell myself, and it was not good. I tried to remember the speech that I had practiced all those nights in the tower, and for some reason all I could remember was the porridge, and the way the straw poked me at night. It was the gingerbread man that saved me. He had clung to my ear for the entire ascent up the garderobe shaft, a lock of hair wrapped around one arm. I'd almost forgotten he was there. He stepped forward, hopped down from my shoulders to the seat, then to the floor. When he was 3 paces from the Duchess, human paces, not gingerbread man paces, he dropped his cookie head and bowed deeply to her. "Oh my," said the Duchess faintly. I suppose most people aren't used to being bowed to by baked goods. It occurred to me too late that the Duchess might be one of those people who found magic unsettling, but no, she worked with all those army wizards, right? The Golden General was her right-hand man. Surely she'd have gotten used to it by now. Regardless, it gave me the time I needed to assemble my thoughts. I took another deep breath. Your Grace, Inquisitor Oberon is sending out assassins to kill magic folk, and I don't know where it's going to stop. I think it might be part of a plot against you. I think with the General out of the city, he's going to try something. I had to warn you, Your Grace. I think you're in terrible danger. I know we, magicers, are. And then the last thing in the world that I expected to happen happened. Oh, my dears, the Duchess's face crumpled. I know. And I don't know what to do. And she burst into tears. And we'll leave it there for tonight.
You didn't expect Nary climbing up a toilet tonight, did you?
Oh, come on!
Always leave them wanting more.
Spindle's professional disgust. The fact that he's looking at the Duchess like, can you believe this?
I'm working with amateurs.
Can't get the alt these days, you know. Yeah, grown-ups do not, in fact, know things.
Yeah, it's one of the central themes of the book that I really love, is Mona's just... 14 is an interesting age because she's obviously working in a trade and living on her own, but at the same time she still has that, you know, childhood grounded faith that adults know the answers, and she's confronting the fact that that's not the case. So yeah, this is a really good place to stop because the next section with the Duchess is really good. I actually charted out the rest of the book and broke it all up into sections because
oh, shiny, that's adorable, thank you. And I promise not to tell Tim.
Okay. Aww.
Aw.
I won't tell Tim. Because based on feedback from Nate visiting, we're lining up some more interviews and some more guests for the rest of the year. And we figured out roughly when we think the book is going to finish so that we can try and get Ursula on the stream so folks can chat with her and ask questions. That's what we're aiming for.
Which, if we can actually make this work, will be super rapidly derailed the first time anyone asks a horticulture question. And then it will be 3 hours later and you won't be able to breathe because you've been laughing too hard.
Yeah, so that's what we're aiming for. That would be really, really good.
There is a reason why Ursula's Twitter account has opinions about potatoes.
And beans. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish. We have a couple of other guests we're trying to line up for interviews, but none of them are confirmed yet. Ursula's not confirmed yet, but it's just the logical choice. So, you know, we'll see what we can do.
Fantastic. So yeah, we're gonna leave the main story there, but come on, come on now, we leave you hanging. We got you. It's all good. Am I doing all of this?
It's not as long as it looks. Those are just the notes. Read the title. And It's just 2 characters. It's just going to be hilarious because you have to make sound effects.
Okay. Have you tried turning it on and off again? A series of conversations between the head of the Magnus Institute and his assistant on a number of highly advanced and complex technical matters. By Shiny Opals. Summary. Martin, what's a zoom on a camera? No, on a computer. What? Oh, it's the some video calling thing. Martin has a lot of jobs to do as Peter's assistant. Some of them are more difficult than others.
So why don't you introduce this is the first time a couple of folks have seen the shenanigans, so why don't you introduce the concept?
Shenanigans is the chaser to the it's dessert, basically.
It's extreme dessert.
It's dessert. We're acutely aware that the reason why we're able to do this is because of the Magnus archives and because, you know, I played Martin's oboe teacher and Tim's absentee kayaking instructor dad. And Every time I do this, there's going to be a different one. You know that, right?
That's great. I look forward to you coming up with the various professional capacities which Peter holds.
So we wanted to, make sure that Magnus folks had something nice every episode. And also, when we started off doing this, and it was horror stories that were really scary quite a lot of the time. And I am a firm believer in what I call brain sorbet, which is if you've watched something traumatic or something frightening, go watch a cartoon or go watch something funny immediately after it, because it helps wash your brain out, hence brain sorbet, cleanses the palate. Also, it's a nice thing, and as Ocean says, we get so few nice things right now, and you all are amazing, so you deserve a nice thing. And I forget, has Shiny done all of these, or is...
Shiny's done the GDPR series, of which this is...
Which are amazing, and I cannot recommend highly enough.
What's happened is that once you introduce the concept of shenanigans, they self-generate.
They do, it's fantastic.
and now we just get to kind of sort through them and pick them and present them, so... All right, here you go.
You want me to do the notes as well?
Do you want me to read the descriptions?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me try this. You're just going to have to scroll up because you read a lot faster than I do. What is INT?
Internal.
Okay. Internal. Magnus Institute. A windowless office kept slightly too cold. Sounds of a harassed Martin Blackwood reading a new HR policy document that requires approval by the head of the Magnus Institute. He is muttering under his breath that this is not in his job description, damn it. Static rises abruptly. By the way, I tried to get the sound effect, I couldn't isolate enough of it. Martin jumps and yelps.
Peter. Martin, what's a Zoom? Martin. What the fuck? Oh, on a camera? Peter. No, on a computer. Martin. What? Oh, it's this video calling thing. Peter. Visceral disgust. A phone call. But with a video? Martin. Yeah, did you need me to help set one up for you?
Silence, while Peter considers whether his bet with Elias is worth it, whether Martin's general usefulness is outweighed by the fact that he's the sort of person who thinks Peter might want to use a video call, or whether Peter ought to throw it all in right now and chuck Martin in the lonely for the sheer audacity of that suggestion.
Peter. No. Martin. Oops. Right. Peter. In fact, I'd best be off. I really ought to go and see that former colleague of mine who suggested that Zoom might be an excellent way to keep in touch. Martin. Panic rising. Maybe you could, that is, there's some institute business that really needs you to look at it for a bit. Now? Peter. Skeptical. Is there? This place seems to run itself without me most of the time.
Internal. Magnus Institute. The same windowless office. Sounds of Martin staring at a tech budget spreadsheet requesting a 5-figure investment in new servers. He is thinking about his B grade in GCSE Maths. He was quite proud of it at the time. He does not feel it qualifies him to approve the expenditure for an entire non-profit organization. He signs off on said budget regardless. It's money going from one evil god to another, after all. So what does it matter? Static rises. Martin's chair makes a squeaky noise as he jumps and yelps again.
Martin, is Zoom the same as Google?
Silence.
Martin. No, Peter. Zoom is not the same as Google.
Internal. Magnus Institute. The same windowless office. The sound of Martin shuffling through papers hurriedly and chewing on his pen. He stops shuffling to tap rapidly on the desk and clears his throat.
Martin, we're very sorry for... No, don't apologise. Apologising is admitting fault. Clears throat again, puts on a deeper voice that just might be trying to imitate the authoritative tones of the archivist. We completely understand your concern, and we have a plan in place to mitigate. Breaks off, returns to his normal voice, or if anything, slightly more high-pitched than normal. Oh, Christ, what if he asks what the plan is? We don't have a plan. I need a plan. How do I come up with a plan in 15 minutes?
Static rises. Martin ignores it.
Peter. Martin, I need your assistance on a technical matter. Martin, somewhere between panic and irritation. What is... Sorry.
We made it this far. It's pretty good.
What is it, Peter? Peter. One of my family members requires I email them a photograph from my phone. Is this possible?
Sounds of the slaughter almost gaining another avatar. Stop. Sounds of the slaughter almost gaining another avatar in the form of Martin K. Blackwood.
Peter, can't this maybe wait an hour? Since I have to go on that phone call with the mayor of London that you asked me to take to discuss with him the incident with that failed artifact retrieval that collapsed the entrance.
Come on, you can do it.
To Perryvale Tube Station. This line is what killed me. Peter, reproachful. It is quite an important.
Try again.
Lion face. Lion face. Oh.
I'm not going to make eye contact. It'll help.
It is quite an important photograph, Martin. Well, maybe if you do the call instead of me, since the mayor did ask to speak to the head of the institute, then I can send you a picture. Peter, overlapping. Oh no, I'm sure you'll do an excellent job. You've got my notes to assist, after all. Martin, yes, the one that said threaten him with unceasing terror was especially helpful. But maybe you can just give me a few minutes to prep. Now, I'll pop through to help with your picture when I'm done. Peter. Very well.
Internal, Magnus Institute, a much larger office. A picture of a large ship on the wall. No crew are visible on its deck, but at the helm a tiny black speck that just might, if one squints, be a ship's cat can be seen. 3 framed divorce certificates decorate the opposite wall. No other personal effects are present. An ominous man, wreathed in fog, sits behind the desk. He is listening to Radio 4 via the BBC website, but he is clearly deeply suspicious about the whole experience and is pining for his analog radio. Knocking from outside.
Peter, come in. Martin, haggard, slightly manic sounding. Hi, Peter. Came to see if I could help you with sending that picture from your phone. Peter, Martin, how did your telephone call go? Does not pause for Martin's answer. It turns out I don't need you at all. I've sent the picture. Martin, faintly. Great. Peter, it's actually quite simple, once you know how. Martin, suddenly deeply fascinated. Peter, well, firstly I discovered a print button near the image on my phone, so I tried that, and it somehow printed to one of the printers in the Institute. I think they call that wireless. I then had to, unfortunately, enlist the help of the woman on the front desk to scan it and send it to my email account. At that point, it was a thing called a PDF, when a PNG had specifically been requested, so I performed a search of the internet for how to convert the former into the latter.
Silence.
Peter, maybe you should write this down, Martin, in case you ever need to do it yourself.
Silence.
Martin, I will do that when I get back to my desk. Peter, approving. It's good to work with someone who recognizes the importance of learning new skills. How is the mayor? Do I need to send him into the Forsaken?
Silence. Sounds of Martin apparently considering this.
Somewhat reluctantly, Martin. No, it's all resolved. Peter, excellent. I told you, this place practically runs itself.
Internal, Magnus Institute, Martin's windowless office. The sound of Martin at work, as he always is. Papers are being moved. Muttering can be overheard. Static. Nobody is shocked anymore.
Peter, Martin, are you busy? Martin, oh, only a little bit. Just trying to research the possible birth of a new fear and end of human existence. You know, nothing that can't be put off. Peter, excellent.
A soft clatter as plastic drops a short height.
Peter, I am expecting an important phone call at any moment, but I need to visit the head. If my phone rings, please answer and explain I shall return shortly. Martin. Right.
Static rises. Peter vanishes. Sounds of Martin Googling nautical slang, quote, the head, unquote. Sounds of Martin softly bashing his head against his desk and regretting all of his life choices. Internal, Magnus Institute, Martin's windowless office. Sounds of Martin staring at his computer screen, typing nothing, trying to figure out what to write in a condolence letter to the wife of an Institute employee who passed away in the line of duty. He is wondering whether the fact that he wants to call Elias in jail to ask if he has a template for this sort of thing is a bad sign for his, Martin's, moral compass. Static rises.
Peter. Martin, is Zoom owned by Google?
Silence.
Martin. No, Peter, Zoom is a separate company.
Internal, Magnus Institute, Martin's windowless office. Sounds of Martin squinting angrily at a 40-page contract form 1894 regarding water supply to and drainage from the Institute building as he prepares himself for an argument with the water company that he strongly feels really ought to be conducted by the head of the Magnus Institute. Static rises again.
Peter. Ah, Martin, another question for your millennial expertise, I'm afraid. Martin. No hint of impatience at all. I mean, why would there be? Yes, Peter? Peter. An acquaintance has sent me I believe you call it PowerPoint presentation regarding the importance of independent learning. I believe this would be very useful to share with employees of the Institute. However, every single slide has his company's logo on it, which I would like removed and replaced with the Institute's crest. Martin. Does your acquaintance know you're doing this? Peter. Not even the tiniest hint of menace. My acquaintance has other things occupying his time at the moment, Martin. Martin. Great. Peter. Shall we? Martin. Yeah, sure. Happy to help. You know me.
Sounds of two sets of Sounds of two sets of receding footsteps. Sounds of Martin, whose primary work experience is with paper files and magnetic tapes, discreetly Googling how to change PowerPoint slide templates on his phone as he walks. Internal, Magnus Institute, Martin's windowless office. Sounds of Martin filling an annual review documents for all the people Peter manages, except John, who Peter said he'd deal with himself, because apparently even indirect email communication that John wouldn't know came from Martin is off limits these days. Not that Martin is bitter about it, not at all. It just seems a bit pointless, Peter, is all he's thinking. If he has to do everyone else's, why can't he at least write a bitchy review about John's performance to make up for all the ones John gave him, complete with a coded message of adoration? That's probably why not, isn't it? Static rises, as always.
Martin, tired. Hello, Peter. Peter. Hello, Martin. I'm having a bit of a conundrum. Martin, even more tired. How can I help? Peter. Well, you see, I ordered a new pair of durable boots on the line, as they call it. Martin overlaps. I don't think that Peter, and you see, I got a particularly good deal. Only today my package arrived, and instead of boots, it was a cheaper pair of fake sunglasses. And when I went back to the website to complain, it had disappeared. Martin takes a moment to center himself, as this is clearly going to be a long one. Right. Okay. What website did you use? Peter. Well, I don't remember. I found it by searching for boots and looking for the best prices. Martin. Don't you have a mansion and a boat and a space station? Not to tell you where to buy your clothes, Peter, but maybe try a website you've heard of next time, if it's all for the sake of saving a few quid. Peter. The Lucas family had a partial stake in that space station, Martin. It wasn't a personal project. Besides, you can hardly hope to gain and retain wealth if you spend it all on frivolous purchases like expensive shoes. A piece of advice from me to you, Martin. If you don't cut down on your non-essentials like all those fancy toasts and things and save your money, you'll never hope to get on the property ladder, let alone be able to invest in a space venture.
Silence, while Martin contemplates murder.
Martin. Right. Yes, thank you, Peter. I will cut down on the brunches. Then I'm sure that will help. Peter, excellent. I'm always so impressed with how willing you are to listen to the wisdom of your elders. Anyway, to return to my boots that were not, in fact, boots. Martin, a deep breath, a brief moment of serenity. Well, sounds like a fake website, harvesting your credit card details. You'd better get onto the bank to reverse the charge and cancel your credit card.
Silence while Peter contemplates the sheer number of phone calls and conversations with people that will entail.
Peter, perhaps that's something you could assist with?
Silence while a whole world of possibilities begins to open up before Martin's eyes.
Of course, Peter. I'd be happy to. But you're going to need to give me your bank details, your credit card information, your passwords, and your mother's maiden name.
Internal, Magnus Institute, Martin's windowless office. Sounds of Martin rubbing his temples as he attempts to resolve an employee dispute that led to a sword fight in the car park between the head of payroll and the head of intake. HR has recommended termination, but Martin feels like firing them at this point would be a reward. He doesn't see why anyone else should get to leave this place if he can't. Static. Again.
Peter. Martin, what's Teams? Martin. Oh, this is perfect. You wouldn't like it. Peter, is it the same as Zoom? Martin, headache intensifies. No, sort of. Bits of it. It's another way to talk to people. Peter, honestly, sometimes I think the internet is just designed to be a communication device. Martin, it is?
Silence as Peter stares at Martin's computer. The disgust is palpable.
I have had some thoughts about my next ritual. Martin, right, great, sounds fun. I'll be dead by the time that comes around, right? So I'll just leave you to it.
Internal, Magnus Institute, Martin's windowless office. Sounds of Martin poring over the annual Institute salary review, which includes recommendations from managers, opposing recommendations from finance, and a note from HR that the head of the Magnus Institute always provides a final recommendation. If Martin spends 10 minutes staring at the email from John to HR regarding the archives team, that is no one else's business but his own. A very familiar static rises.
Peter, Martin, I've got another technical question. Martin, you don't say. Yes, Peter? Peter, I've received a notification on my personal computer that my antivirus subscription is going to expire in a month, and I was thinking, do I really need to renew it? It is, after all, an expenditure I could do without. Martin, yeah, those, space stations don't come cheap after all. Peter, exactly. Perhaps you can research if it's necessary. Martin, definitely not being sarcastic. Not at all. You know, Peter, I think you could probably do without. Antivirus is just a scam, really, trying to get people who don't know any better. Besides, you're pretty good at tech stuff these days. Peter, I suppose I am, aren't I? Oh, that is good to know, Martin. How's the Institute going? Still running itself? Martin, there are no gritted teeth here. Oh, yeah. Hardly needs any work at all, this place. Peter, wonderful. Well, we're getting closer to it all coming together, so I'll be seeing you soon.
Static rises. Peter leaves. Sounds of Martin deciding, sod it, and signing off on a 10% pay increase for everyone, except the archives, who gets 20%.
Notes. Did Zoom and Teams exist in 2018? Discovering this information would be impossible. However, this fic is based on a series of interactions with my father during 2020 lockdown. All of the questions asked are real questions I had to answer. Oh, shiny. My answers varied from Martin's because I am not yet plotting my father's downfall. Anyway, if you successfully manage to make any of the sound effects from the above, please get in touch with Rusty Quill and volunteer your services. I hear they are struggling to make kissing noises not sound gross. If you can do the above, you could do anything. That is wonderful.
That was glorious.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. I did try to get a little tiny clip of the static noise, but it didn't play long enough, and I don't have like a little... Ironically, I do not have a micro recorder that I can play. So.
Which we really should get at some point.
Or we're going to get one of those Stream Deck things where you push the button and it makes a noise.
Yes.
That's my level.
Like a soundboard.
That's my level of technical expertise. Martin! Martin, push the button and make the noise!
What's a Zoom? Right, that is our show, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everybody who's contributed. Thanks to everyone who was in the audience. We will be back in 2 days on the Rusty Quill stream. This time we mean it. Where we will be doing the first half of Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu, which is one of the original Western vampire stories. And super gay, basically.
Yeah, lesbian.
Massively lesbian. It's a fun time. And we'll be there from 8
o'clock on Friday.
8 till 10. And then on Sunday we'll be doing the 10 till 12 usual slot, AM slot. But we are still undecided as to whether that will be Windbound or Goose Crimes.
That's correct.
Yes. But that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. The Twitter thread will be up directly, and we will see you next time.